The authorities are considering building a velodrome in Singapore as part of the Vision 2030 Sports Master Plan. A feasibility study is underway on the cost-effectiveness of constructing and running such an arena for track cycling. The cycling fraternity says a velodrome will give competitive cyclists a dedicated training venue, as opposed to having to train on congested roads. Such a facility could also boost their chances of success in major competitions like the Olympics. More from Faris Mokhtar in this week's Spotlight.
In the 2012 London Olympics, the British cycling team won 7 out of 10 track cycling gold medals, a vast improvement from the sole gold medal win for their track cycling team at the 2000 Sydney Olympics. And it's part of a broader transformation that's seen the country develop into a global cycling powerhouse, with success on the track and in road cycling events like the Tour de France. It's been attributed to the building of a velodrome in Manchester in 1994 as a focal point for the country's cycling development. In Southeast Asia, countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia and Thailand have their own velodromes. Malaysia, for instance, is planning to build its third facility in time for the 2017 Southeast Asian Games. A velodrome that's used for competitive track cycling can be built as an indoor or outdoor facility. An Olympic standard velodrome must have a 250-meter track. Its 45-degree curved corner sections allow riders to ride around the arena at speeds of up to 80 kilometers per hour. In Landstrap, Singapore, a key consideration is the space needed for such a facility. The Manchester Velodrome in England, for instance, takes up the space equivalent to 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Another factor is whether building one makes business sense. A velodrome can cost between 30 and 200 million Singapore dollars.
Building a velodrome itself is not expensive, but it's the land cost that is expensive. They have to look at the business aspect on how to get back the ROI for the building per se. Building one velodrome is one thing, maintaining it is another thing. But looking at it, even like say example, the area surrounding the velodrome you can use for circuit training, you can use for criterium races. The velodrome itself can at least host 6 continental races, or even like if you take the Japanese model, that they have races almost every week, and that can generate kind of a business.
One way to optimize the space is to build a velodrome as part of a larger sports arena that includes other facilities such as sports halls and gyms, something which the soon-to-be-built velodrome in the city of Derby in England will have. Another option is to have a temporary track retrofitted into an existing stadium, or even build a temporary velodrome, which was done at the 2006 Doha Asian Games. Australian architecture firm JSA Studio was part of the consortium that handled that project.
Governments or whoever requires the track for going for a temporary track or a movable or relocatable track is because velodromes are very specialised. Unlike a lot of facilities, you can only use a velodrome for one thing, and that's for track cycling. The idea of the Doha Velodrome, not only was it a temporary and portable track, but it was also a temporary shell. The idea behind that facility was that everything was dismantleable, like fitted to containers, and could be relocated.
But the choice of whether to have a permanent or temporary velodrome will also depend on how many cycling events it will host.
A place like Singapore may well take the view that a permanent facility is appropriate simply because Singapore wants to always bring major and minor events to its city. So it's not necessarily going to be the best option to have a temporary facility. If there are enough events in Asia to fill a permanent facility on a regular basis, then you might well consider a permanent facility.
They've been called by competitive riders here to build a velodrome. One of them is 19-year-old national cyclist Mohammed Elias Youssef, who has represented Singapore in a number of international junior competitions.
Most importantly, it provides us with a much more safe and conducive training environment. It is also help us prepare a lot more for the track-specific events in the Velodrome. For example, all the major games in the world, the Olympics, the Asian Games, even in SEA Games sometimes there are track riding events, but we are not able to sufficiently prepare ourselves because we don't have the track here.
Without a velodrome, cyclists here have 3 training options. One is to train on the roads, but that has its own dangers.
We don't get spotted by these heavy vehicles and we are still put at risk, no matter how clear the road may seem. There was once, I was along Mandai Road, the 3 lanes, it looked really clear. I was just riding beside my friend. All of a sudden we heard a huge squeal behind us. There was one van who just got really close and probably didn't see us. He had to jam his brakes. He actually mounted the curb to avoid us.
Another option is to train overseas. Usually, Elias will fly to the host country a week before the competition starts at his own expense. Costs for such stints range between 1,000 and 10,000 Singapore dollars. Still, he said it's a challenge to compete with international cyclists who have velodromes in their home countries.
It's not very likely that we can get to the same level as them in these events, as they are far more prepared than us with their specific training on the track. We usually fund ourselves for these extra trips. If we have more funding, we could probably stay over longer, prepare ourselves better for these events and hopefully produce more glory for the country.
The third option is to train using indoor cycling trainers which can be set up in one's home. Functioning like a stationary bike, it provides undisrupted training, although riders say it does not mimic actual riding. The plan to consider building a velodrome comes at a time when the sport is gaining popularity. And those in the cycling fraternity say having a velodrome can further boost the sport's profile.
Probably, I'd say 90% of the population wouldn't have seen a velodrome before or even know what a velodrome is. So having a velodrome here would probably build interest, and I'm sure some people would want to give it a try.
Despite the lack of a dedicated velodrome in the country, Singapore cyclists have managed to win medals in track events at the Southeast Asian Games in the past, the last of which was in 1997. And the possibility of having their own velodrome has fueled dreams of Olympic glory in the years ahead.